Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Amelia and today we're going to be doing my quite belated June wrap-up reset type thing. If you haven't seen one of my resets before, we do 3 things. So we're going to talk about all the books that I read in June. We are going to set up my reading journal for July, and then finally we're going to talk about all of my July TBR choices. So without further ado, we're already late enough to this video, so let's just go ahead and jump straight into talking about everything I read in June. Okay, so the first thing I read in June was Valor by John Gwynne. This is book 2 of The Faithful and the Fallen, and honestly at this point it's been quite a while since I read this book, since I finished it like pretty early on in June and we are now a week into July, so a lot of it I've kind of forgotten. This book was decent, but it hasn't been something that's like stuck with me by any chance, and I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars, which I think is still like a pretty good rating. I've been a lot more harsh, I guess the word is, on my book ratings recently, just because I felt like I was rating things at the same level as things that I knew I enjoyed a lot more, so they definitely didn't deserve to be there. So I'm trying to really prune my ratings a lot more, and I have a new rating system that I am kind of trialing at the moment. I didn't really use it for all of these because I had sort of rated them before I worked it all out, but I will be doing a video soon on that, so if you're interested in that, maybe subscribe so that you see that when it comes out. But Valor, I got a little bit sidetracked already. That's kind of a theme in my videos, is that I get sidetracked a bit, but as I said, my general impression of this book was that I liked it, but I didn't really feel that it had anything that really stood out to me. And that's been kind of the vibe of the series so far. Like, it has some things that are unique that I like, but I wouldn't say that it's like a favorite series or anything so far. I much prefer the Bloodsworn saga by this same author, his most recent work, to this. This one just feels a little bit generic in places, unfortunately. I hate saying that, but it's kind of true. For me, I don't think it's really lived up to the hype that I hear about it online. I don't know what it is exactly about it, but you know, certain books speak to certain people and these ones aren't speaking to me as much. I think some of the characters are, for the most part, I think the character work is good and there are a few interesting characters, but some of them just feel a little bit, but oh my god, okay. I'm sorry, this review has just like, I don't even feel like I know what I'm saying right now. But let me just move on. So in terms of plot and pacing with this book, I think that it was a little bit slow, especially in the beginning. It had been a little bit of time since I read the first one, so we would get to like new characters and stuff, and it would take me a minute to remember who they were from the previous book, which is kind of like my own fault, but also I don't feel like I usually have this problem. Like, I feel like when I go back to a series after a month or a couple months away, I usually remember who everybody is for the most part. And I did remember once I started reading, but I think just the fact that I was forgetting a lot of stuff sort of shows a little bit how, I don't know, something about this series, just like, it's good, but it just doesn't stick. That's like my main thing about this, is like it needs more something, and I don't really know what that something is, but it needs it. I'm sorry, this has been the worst review of all time. I'm gonna continue this series. I have Ruin here. I'll probably get to it maybe next month, but I'm just gonna stop talking about this book because it seems like I can't say anything intelligent right now. Okay, my next book is at the bottom of a stack of books, so if you hear crashing, that's why. So the next book that I read was The Lost Bookshop by E.B. Woods, and this was just like a random chance read. My mother-in-law bought it for me from Costco, and she just like, I guess, thought that I would enjoy it, so it came into my possession. I had never heard of it before, never heard anyone talk about it online, or like hadn't even like seen it in a bookstore before, and I don't think I've really seen it in one since, but I don't usually go to, I feel like this would be kind of like in the literary fiction section, and I don't usually peruse that section much, so there is that. And actually I was surprised by how much I enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. And it's definitely not close to being a 5-star by any means, but it was, as I said, surprisingly enjoyable. It's set mostly in modern Dublin with some like historical jaunts as we go like kind of back and forth in time with the modern timeline and then the past timeline, which features a woman who is like trying to get away from her family because her brother wants to marry her off to save the family fortunes, you know, the usual stick, or something I feel like you see often in sort of historical type books. She takes up book selling and collecting, and we sort of follow her as her life journey takes her from where she initially runs away in Paris to Ireland, where she finds this lost bookshop, as it is called. Well, the bookshop's not called that, but the book, you know what I mean. And then we have our modern timeline, which is following a woman who has run away from an abusive marriage, and she comes to Dublin as well and ends up living in this house of this kind of mysterious old lady, which I won't go too much more into because I don't want to spoil anything. But there's also a little bit of a magical realism element with the bookstore. It's not like super prevalent, but it comes more into play at the end. And I really liked the way that that small bit of magical realism, I guess I was looking for a different word, but I don't know what that word was. I liked the way it was woven in. It really added to the story in a pretty subtle sort of way. Sorry, I don't know what I'm doing with my hands today. Today I don't even know what's going on today. But it actually deals with a lot deeper topics than I was expecting it to, and you should definitely check the trigger warnings if you're thinking about picking it up. As I said, there is a woman running away from an abusive marriage, so we talk about domestic abuse and assault a decent amount in the book, as well as alcoholism, and at one point a character is also imprisoned in a psych ward, so if any of those things would trigger you, you should maybe reconsider reading this book. But I think the way that it deals with those topics is fairly well done. The way that it sort of explores, I guess, women's issues. Not that anybody can't have issues with abusive partners and mental health. And I guess the alcoholism guy happens to a man, and there isn't really women involved in that part so much. But the other parts, especially historically, have been issues that women have to deal with, you know, men having control over their lives. And so the story is a lot about women taking back that control over their lives. And yeah, the bookstore is just kind of the stage for that to happen on. All right, and then after that, I decided that I would be an intelligent human and try to read some classics, because we all know that your intellectualism is inherently linked to whether or not you've read old books. That's sarcasm, by the way. But I read Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, and this one was okay. It was okay. That's kind of all I can really say for it in terms of enjoyment. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And look, I understand that the characters are meant to be like mean and pretentious and kind of terrible people, but even though I understand that, I get that's like the point, doesn't mean that it's enjoyable to read. So Henry in particular, different Henry from the aforementioned one, I'm pretty sure that's his name. Anyway, I don't really care that much. He just spends like the whole book spewing a bad take after bad take, and so many of them are about women. And honestly, I just see enough of people shitting on women in our current world without having to deal with it in all my books too. And obviously, you know, literature often reflects society and comments on society, but I don't know, it didn't really feel like it did without any sort of counter to Henry's shitty takes. It didn't feel as much like commentary as much as like, haha, look at this terrible person. And obviously we do have sort of the counterance with what happens to Dorian in the end, which I obviously won't say because that's kind of spoilers, I would say. But yeah, I don't know, I just felt like it could have done slightly more with that. And I do think the thing with the picture is an interesting, it's really hard to talk about that without spoiling the book, because it's kind of like the main shtick that it has going on is like the thing with Dorian and the picture of him. Although, you know, when the book is this old, do spoilers, like, does that matter? Would you guys be upset? I don't know. I won't spoil it for you just in case. But I liked what was going on there with I'll try to say like generally like the idea of a beautiful face hiding sort of like a rotten, spoiled soul type of deal. I liked the sort of thing that was going on there. Again, I feel like I'm saying the same thing in different words, but it's kind of hard. You know, it's not a long book. There's not a lot that happens. There's like nothing that happens in this book. Oh my god, like nothing happens except for Henry talking, which like in some instances can be fine. But honestly, I was just sick of the man, hated him so much, which again, I know it's the point, but that doesn't mean it was enjoyable. The writing is, of course, though, like very well put together. It's good writing. I definitely can't knock it for that. And I think if he had only like trimmed down the sections where Henry is opening his mouth, then I would have enjoyed it a lot more. I have to admit that I did some serious skimming and like would have to force myself to kind of go back and actually try to like read through the words. But there were a lot of sections where I was just like, I don't know if I care what these words say that much. And all in all, I think he probably could have gotten across what he was trying to say in significantly fewer pages, because I don't, at some points, you know, he's got some interesting commentary, but I just don't think it's that profound. I'm sorry, I said it. And maybe I should downgrade my rating more, but I just think the writing was really good. So, I don't know. 3, 2.5 maybe? I don't know. I feel bad if I rate a classic less than that, but it's a book. I should enjoy it even if it's just trying to say something, right? Alright, next I read Mirrored Heavens by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the conclusion to the Between Earth and Sky trilogy. And I did a read and review video of this book, so if you're interested in seeing my sort of more live reactions as well as a more in-depth review, definitely check that out. But I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I've played around with lowering it, but I think I'm probably going to keep it there. It was, however, a bit of a letdown, so like maybe a bit less, but anyway. There were elements about it that I did like, but I really think that Black Sun was the only book in this trilogy that was genuinely like quite good, and it's been a little bit downhill since there. I thought Fevered Star would maybe just kind of be like, you know, middle book syndrome and this would pick it up, but while there were, you know, good things about this book, I don't think it offered a satisfying conclusion in a lot of senses. So my main problem was really that this book started out quite slow, and then we start building towards this big battle that we were also sort of building towards in Fevered Star. So, you know, we're building up, we're spending a whole bunch of pages doing that, and then it all wraps up in like 10 pages, and there's like not really a battle, which, you know, sometimes it's fine, like it doesn't have to be always a battle, but you know, they were building up towards it being that, and then there was a battle, but it was like all off page and like seemed to wrap up super easily. So I just felt that that whole thing was very anticlimactic. Like we have the whole build up and there's like a little fight, like a little boss fight kind of deal, and then somehow just like all the other armies just kind of get dealt with like super easily, and it just felt a little bit, as I said, like a letdown, because you're expecting this epic sort of scene, battle scene, fight scene, whatever, and I just didn't really feel like we got that. And I also kind of just felt like Roanhorse sort of just like lost the plot. Like I don't know what Serapio was doing this like whole book. Like he comes to Tova as the avatar of his god, and then I guess the god kind of just like abandoned him a little, but then he decides that he's going to take over the city and become its king, and he's like killing people and being ruthless to have this power that he never originally set out trying to claim. He was just like, I'm doing my god thing or whatever, and then I guess he just decided he liked power, but he's like killed so many of these people, but he's just like, then he decides that he has to like protect them from the outside armies. It's like, they kind of need protection from you, buddy. And then he goes off on this whole thing trying to follow this prophecy that seems to have not really much impact in the end at all, other than like getting him to sort of like check off these things during the plot, like the main part of the book. And it just felt like, what was the point of all of that? Because it doesn't seem to matter in the end. So that was a bit strange. I think the part that I liked the most about this book was Ciela's sort of part, her coming into her own power and dealing with her islands and learning a bit more about that part of the culture, and her, like, as I said, really becoming powerful and becoming who she was sort of meant to be. I enjoyed that. I, for the most part, enjoy her as a character. Narampa, on the other hand, Narampa, I don't know exactly how you say it. She got like totally shafted in this book. She's like off on the side. She only has like a couple POVs. She's kind of like doing her own thing, and she does this whole thing in the end that kind of has like some impact, but like doesn't also really at the same time. And I just felt that was very sort of strange, and she felt like she was off in her own book practically. But I enjoyed the book like in the moment as I was reading it, and like once we got past like sort of slow beginning, like the build up and all that stuff was good, but then yeah, as I said, the end was kind of a letdown, and the more I think about it after the fact, the more I'm just like, what even was that? But yeah, that was Mirrored Heavens. I did annotate this one a bit. I don't know if you can really see from there. I don't know if I had that many notes, just kind of like, yeah, I don't know. Unfortunately, this series didn't quite go in the direction that I hoped for when I read Black Sun. Alright, after that, I did a sci-fi reading vlog, so if you haven't seen that one, check that one out also. But the first book I read for that was Hyperion by Dan Simmons, and I ended up giving this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. I also annotated this one quite heavily, so that was fun. I just love the way that the spines look when they're full of all the little tabs and like flipping through afterwards, and you see all like the little notes you had. I don't know. I just find that it helps deepen the reading experience for me. And I would have loved this book if it wasn't for the strange sort of treatment of women in regards to people just randomly having sex all the time. So the book is told in a combination of the characters' past through each of like, we have a group of characters who are coming together to go on like a quest, and each night one of them tells their story, and it always sort of relates in some way to Hyperion, which is like the world that they're going to in this like planet human society type thing. Intergalactic? Yeah, I think it's intergalactic. Or is it? I don't know. Space travel. But it switches between them telling their stories, so going back in time to those, and then some mostly shorter chapters in the present tense as they progress towards Hyperion and their goal. And I really enjoyed that structure. I thought it was very interesting and allowed us to get like sort of equal-ish in-depth time with each of our characters. So I really liked that. I felt like the character work that was done in each of those to sort of build up to who they are now in what's going to be, I guess, the next book. What's it called? Fall of Hyperion. So I liked that. And I also thought the writing was quite good, especially in the beginning. There were a lot of like descriptions and stuff that I really enjoyed. Felt they were really artfully crafted, I guess. However, as I said, what is the deal with the sex in this book? Like, it really just like, okay, I don't mind like a sex scene or two in a book, like that's fine. But like, what the hell was this? I'm sorry, but the second character to tell his story has this like experience in a training simulator where this woman just like randomly appears and like helps him kill this guy who's trying to kill him, and then afterwards, no words at all, they just start getting it on, and I'm like, okay, slightly strange. And that happens like a few more times, and then later she appears in this scene where he's not in a sim and they kill some guys, and then they start doing it, and then she starts to transform into like a steel monster. And I cannot say what happened after that because I don't think I could explain it in words that would be YouTube friendly. But if you know what scene I'm talking about, like what? Excuse me? I was like, am I reading this correctly? What? Why? That's the only question I have is like, why? Why did we need to read that? I wish I could scrub that from my memory. It was quite disturbing. And then there's another character's story where this guy meets a girl and she's 16 and he's 20 and he gets her pregnant, which like is bad enough as it is. But then like he works off planet, I guess, and because of like space time, the differences in, time is different when you're traveling closer to the speed of light kind of deal. He's like the same age or like slightly older, but like not much older every time he comes back, but she's like 20 years older. And that relationship just felt strange to me. Like, obviously age gap differences, like when you're both like full ass adults, do your own thing. But something about the way, I don't know, it just felt weird in this book. It was weird when it started, when she was 16 and he got her pregnant. It was weird at the end when he was like 20 and she was dead. Yeah, I don't know. And there was also like one more instance in the female character's story, but like at least there was slightly more emotional build up to that. Like it did still come on like quite quickly, their sort of emotional attachment, but like at least there was some sort of emotional attachment. It wasn't just like random girl appears and immediately we're naked. Yeah, so if some of that had been cut out, I would have really enjoyed this a lot more. But reading specifically the thing with the steel monster lady really took me out of the book. And I saw some YouTuber recently, I don't know who it was, talking about how this was like their favorite book of the year, and I'm just like, yeah, you know, that tracks, because this book feels like it was written for men. So that's all I'll say about her, period. Alright, and then the next book I read for that video, and the last book that I read in June, was The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. And I ended up giving this book a 5 out of 5 stars. It is a very short sci-fi, although sci-fi is not at all the main focus of the book. The main focus is discussion of morals, specifically in regard to power and unchecked power. So this book's 184 pages, so you know, as I said, very short. And it's essentially about a man whose dreams can change reality, and the psychologist that he's sent to because he is abusing drugs so that he can sleep without dreaming, because he is afraid to have these dreams and change the world because he cannot control how they change the world. And so the psychologist is assigned to help him work through his fear of dreaming, but he ends up co-opting those dreams for his own means once he realizes that through hypnosis he can control the content of the dreams. And he has originally like good intentions, but we quickly begin to see that even if somebody has, you know, good intentions, they mean well, the actions they take when they have access to unlimited power quickly can become quite immoral. It talks a lot about morality and invites the reader to ponder sort of the morality of actions that have a positive effect for like a great number of people, but was taken without their consent and at the expense of another group of people. So one of the things that comes up often in this is like the greater good, which is kind of a bit of a yikes. You know, I feel like that sort of usually ends up leading down not so great rabbit holes. And I feel like this would be a really good book club book, because I think there's a lot to sort of discuss. And it was also a really good just reading experience in general. I thought Orr, who is the main character, was a very well written and sort of real feeling main character with very sort of real thoughts and emotions and worries that anybody could really relate to, even though obviously they can't dream up a new reality. And I really recommend this to anybody. As I said, it is 184 pages, so it is a quick, short read, and I'm definitely going to check out more by Le Guin. But yeah, that is all that I read in June. It was actually a pretty good reading month. What did I have? 4, 5, 6. I think that is the most books I've read in a month in a while, so, you know, I'll take it. And a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of the quality, but overall I would say I enjoyed myself. So let's go ahead now and we will jump into my July reading journal setup, and make sure to stick around to the end so we can talk about my July TBR. Alright, welcome to my reading journal setup for the month of July. So this one ended up being a lot more involved than I thought I was gonna do, especially since by the time I started setting this out, we were already like a decent bit into July, and I was like, oh, I gotta, you know, get something put together so that I can be set up for the month and so I can put out this video. But then I had the idea to do like a bug wall type thing, you know, like how you would see like at a museum or something like that, like the bugs pinned up, like the dead bugs pinned up and framed as like a biological tool type thing. yeah, so that was what I was going for with this. And in the end, I ended up having 5.5 hours worth of footage. And that does not include the time that I spent sketching out everything, which was probably equal to that, if not more. So, yeah, this was a very involved theme. So, if you do end up liking this video, consider giving it an actual like, because it was a very time consuming one, which was not what I set out to do when I realized how late I was going to be to the July reset. But here we are. I sort of had the idea, and then I just like was sold. I couldn't just like give up and do something else and come back to it later. I was like, nah, I gotta do it now, even if it takes me like several days worth of work, because who's gonna just sit there and do that straight for that many hours? I mean, most of the filming for this I did do straight in one session, but the setup I did over a couple of days. And so yeah, I decided that I wanted to do like a tiled kind of gallery wall of the creatures and like a bunch of different frames, a bunch of different creatures. I mostly have butterflies, beetles, I got some dragonflies, moth, scorpion, bee, some generic bug type things. And yeah, so just kind of like, I was looking at one sort of reference image, and it was actually a stained glass. So it wasn't like a real like picture of these things. So it's kind of interesting how I came to this conclusion, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense. But then I just kind of Googled bugs and looked for ones that were kind of interesting to add into all my different frame sizes. I hadn't like decided in advance what the frames were gonna have in them. I just first drew a bunch of squares and rectangles in a way that would fill up the whole page. And then I looked up different styles of frame and created a whole bunch of different frames that filled those boxes, trying to go for a variety of frames, not just all plain rectangles, but to include some different shapes that would make it more visually appealing, different shapes, different sizes. And then I just sort of started looking for bugs that I thought would fill the different aspect ratios of the frame the best. And yeah, so I definitely found this a little bit more challenging than some of the stuff I've been doing recently, because it requires a little bit more precision, I guess I would say, than like the last month and the month before that. But I did enjoy it. It was a bit more of a challenge than those. Although I hate doing like the curved frames just because I obviously can't use a ruler to guide those lines, and I don't have the world's steadiest hands or the most confident line drawing skills. That's probably something that I should practice. So I end up going off target relatively often, or having like a shaky hand or something. And I made a few mistakes on this front page. So for example, you can see on the month in review box, I accidentally drew past the line, and then I had a big squiggle on the downstroke of the right side, because I think I decided then that I was going to do that part without a ruler, and instantly regretted that. So I guess more of the story is be more careful when using your ruler, and that you should use your ruler when you have it and you're going to do a straight line. But yeah, unfortunately for the circles, I had no help, had to go freehand. That doesn't always end the best for me, unfortunately. And then in terms of the coloring in, when I first finished like all of the black outlines, I had a moment where I was like, oh, should I even color these in? Like, I kind of like how they look now. But I did pretty recently do a bookshelf theme where I didn't color them in, and I didn't want to do like that same sort of vibe again, so I decided that I was going to color them in. And I had initially done like a test color of the beetle on the top left of the right side page, and I liked the way that looked, so I decided, what, I'm going to commit. I'm going to color all of them, and I do think that I am glad that I colored them in. It definitely makes it a lot more interesting to look at than just plain lines. but I almost feel like I liked it the most in the pencil lines, which is maybe kind of strange, but I don't know. I just love a good pencil sketch. I feel like they look so good. And I tried a different, I guess you would call it medium this time, which is, as you can see, colored pencils. That is not something I've used in a reading journal ever. I used them, I think, a little bit when I first started bullet journaling because that was what I had, and then pretty quickly switched to markers and never looked back. I just think for a lot of typical bullet journal, reading journal sort of themes, markers just are more appropriate. Like, they have really vibrant colors, they suit a simpler design, which is commonly popular. But for this, I did not think they would be appropriate, and partially because of like blending of colors. Like, if you look at beetles, they're often kind of slightly like iridescent almost, and I didn't know how I would accomplish that with markers. Like, obviously there are some markers you can blend, but the pages, like the paper thickness in this book is decent, but I don't think it would withstand multiple layers of marker as I tried to layer them. So I just decided to take a different route, and I think it was an interesting challenge to try to work with a different sort of medium. I didn't have like especially good colored pencils or anything. I had like a little set that I've had for a while now, and they're all right, but I wouldn't say they're like the most saturated or anything like that. But I wasn't about to buy like nice colored pencils to do one theme. I'll just like use what I have. But honestly, I don't know if like fancier colored pencils would have made it better anyway, because then you have to know how to use them properly, which is not something that I know how to do. I was just kind of winging it. But I'm happy with the way it turned out. It's a little bit muted, but I kind of think that works because I used a whole like range of different colors, and I think if they're all really bright, they would have competed for they would have competed for attention a lot more than they do this way. But anyways, we are been on this next page for a while now, and I haven't said anything about it, so I do just want to briefly talk about it a little bit. So I ended up switching my TBR and month in review pages locations. I don't really know that I did that on purpose. I just kind of did it. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe it would have looked better if I did the TBR page beside the title page, because then it would have been a full spread of the boxes, like in retrospect. I wish I had done that, but you know, we are here now and there is nothing I can do about it. And so for the TBR, I thought it would be fun to put the book titles in different frames, and I do really like how that turned out, although I should have used a different marker for the ones that I decided to put in cursive. I think I should have just used the pen that I normally write with. I think that would have looked better, and maybe done one more of them in the cursive. But I was trying to go for like, you know, different fonts, kind of like the different bugs thing, but most of them ended up actually being stamped, and I probably should have mixed that up a little bit more. But I still really like the way that it turned out. I think that the variation is interesting. We have a slightly fewer bugs on this page. Well, I mean, obviously to make way for the titles, but I was kind of getting sick of drawing bugs at this point. I was just like, I just kind of want this to be over. Especially when I was like coloring in the frames and stuff. I'm like, I don't want to draw, like color in another brown frame. It's kind of boring. I have been sitting here for 5 hours and I am ready to be done coloring in bugs. But we are very near to the end now, just finishing the last few things from the TBR page, and then of course going into my pages read spread. I'm realizing now that I usually don't fill out the TBR page till after I've told you what my TBR is, so consider this spoilers, I guess. But here's a quick flip through of my pages. And with that out of the way, let's jump into my July TBR. Alright, welcome back. I hope you have enjoyed setting up my reading journal with me. I have a big stack here of books that I am hoping to read this month. As usual, I'm going above the amount of books that I'm probably going to read so that I have options. we've been over this before, but you know, it's worth mentioning. I have a lot of books in this pile, or at least a few, that are repeat offenders for my TBR that I have not got around to reading yet. But I am not buying books this month, so that means I've got to read the books I already have, which will hopefully lead to me reading some of these books that have been put on TBR after TBR and not gotten to. So, without further ado, the usual Dead House Gates. I have been meaning to read Malazan this year, and we are now 6 months in, and I have not read a single one. I read the first one. Did I read it last year? I think I might have read it last year. It may have even been the year before that. So, I don't really remember. I mean, I remember stuff, but, you know, I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, but this is one I would like to get to. Yeah, I'm just gonna put that down. And then I have a book that I am also currently reading, which is Dragon's Legacy by Deborah A. Wolfe. Now, this is not something I've heard people talk about at all, but I had seen The Forbidden City. That's the second book in the series. I had seen the cover in Indigo, and I took a picture because I was like, ooh, that looks cool. And then I discovered it was the second book in the series, and that this was the first one. And I read like a little, they had like the first couple, like first chapter or whatever as a demo that you could read on the Indigo website. And I started reading it, and I thought the writing was really nice. So I ordered the book, and now I'm on page 244, and I'm really enjoying it. This is a very sort of heavy world building book. It seems like the world is not like insanely expansive, but quite in depth, which is something I really like. I love a good world building extravaganza, I guess I could say. And I think the characters are really interesting. We have a lot of POVs, but they're all kind of leading towards the same sort of plot. Like most of them are together in the same group. So it's an interesting way to tell the story, because it's like, instead of following like this character as they go around and do this thing, you're following this storyline, and you'll get different parts from different POVs of that storyline, if that makes sense. So yeah, that is this one. I'm really enjoying it so far, and I will let you know at the end of the month if I continue to enjoy it. After that, we have Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie. This is the final book in, what is this series called? I think it's called First Law. Yeah, First Law. And I found this really pretty edition. So now I'm gonna have to get the second book in this edition. I have it in the normal paperback, but it doesn't match. So at some point I'm gonna have to get this one, or the second one in this edition, as well as the first. But this is, as I said, the final book in a trilogy, so I can't say too much about it without spoiling everything, but it looks like we're going to be having probably some quite large battles in this, some magic, maybe some torture. This is a grimdark series, so it is relatively graphic on that front, so that's something to note if you've thought about picking up some Joe Abercrombie. He's kind of on the darker side. So yeah, that is Last Argument of Kings. I really enjoyed the character work so far in this series, so I'm hoping that we get some great endings to our character arcs. Next up, I have Priestess in White by Trudy Canavan. This is something I just picked up at the thrift store, another thing I've never heard of, but it seems like it will be interesting. We've got magic, sorcerers, an army. It seems like something I would like, and the cover sort of caught my eye when I was in the store, so I picked it up. And also this silhouette thing really makes me think of, we used to have these covers of Lord of the Rings that was like a silhouette of the Fellowship, like from the movie, and it really reminds me of that. So that is Priestess in White. I'm really trying to pick up some books recently that are not things that I've specifically heard about, that aren't like the big things talked about on BookTube, which, you know, can be a mixed bag, because a lot of the times the things that are talked about because they are good. But it doesn't mean that other things aren't also good. So yeah, I'm trying to break out a little bit. With that being said, the next book on my list is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I've already read this, but I've been wanting to do a reread. because I want to make a video talking about just sort of the whole Realm of the Elderlings series. And also I wanted to, sorry, I got distracted. I wanted to annotate this, but this is like a really nice special edition, and I didn't want to write in it, and I didn't want to buy another copy of it. Sorry, that was probably loud. Just to write in it. So I've got like these like, they're like highlighting tape for like, you know, highlighting lines that I like, as well as like these translucent sticky notes that I can write on. So that will be a fun experience. I might do a vlog, you know, trying out a new annotation method. If you're interested in that at all, let me know. But that one I've been trying to get back to for a couple of months now. So this is like the second one on the pile that's like, I'd really like to get to this month. I think I might actually read this once I'm finished with Legacy of Dragons, Dragon's Legacy. Already forgot the title. And then after that, I have Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. I've been trying to sort of space out my reading of Stormlight Archive so that it will all be fresh in my mind come December, I think it is, when the 5th book in this series comes out. So that's kind of my reasoning there, but I also want to keep them close enough together that they're still fresh in my mind and I don't like forget stuff between each of the books. Oh, there's some really pretty art in here. I won't show it to you because it could be spoilery, but this one is a thick book. It is 1,200 pages long, which is quite thick, quite a lot of pages. This is probably going to take me at least a week to read, and I already have some relatively thick books on the stack, so this might be like something I read towards the end of the month and like carry over into August. I don't really know. We'll see where the mood takes me. But yeah, book 3 of Stormlight is something I would like to at least start this month. And then the final book on my list is Fall of the Neverdark by Philip C. Quaintrell. This is the 4th book in the Echoes saga, and I guess it picks up 30 years after the first trilogy sort of deal, I think. And this series, you know, it hasn't been that good, but I own them all, and so I'm still continuing to read them because I don't want to have a series on my shelf that I haven't read. So I want to read it, even if, you know, sometimes it's not the best. But, you know, I keep hoping that as I get further through the books, you know, he'll have had practice with his writing and it will get better. But the first 3, no dice. We shall see what happens with the 4th. But yeah, that is the final book on my quite large stack. It's only 7 books, which is only one more than I read in June. But the size of some of these books is quite concerning. As I said, we're not intending to finish all of these. It's like a starting point kind of deal. So yeah, that is the plan for July. And then I should also say that I did already actually finish one book. I finished Leviathan Wakes. I did start this in June as part of my sci-fi reading vlog, but I thought I would mention that I did already finish it. So that's 1 book down for the month, maybe 7 more to go. We shall see. But yeah, that is all I have time for today. So let me know in the comments what you're going to be reading for July. Thank you so much for watching this very belated monthly reset. And I will see you next time.